Okay, well, my stream died by itself. This is where it loaded me. This is going to be a very fast stream because I can't get out of here. Well, I guess I don't have to turn it off, right? I can load because I can't do quest map. Can I? Well, maybe I can. Will it let me? Oh, okay. Never mind. It lets me travel from there. It loaded me by the locked box with the freaking door closed on me. Oh my. Move over. Move over.
Inquisition.
Zelda. Okay, this one is Josephine. Is she ready? Yes.
Let us begin.
Inquisitor.
I never really know what to do with that or care that much.
The thought of selling the old farm to strangers when it meant so much to him. The property deserved a new chapter, not demolition. Hence my cross-country move from urban Portland to rural Rappahannock County, Virginia. As I crested the last hill, a wave of nostalgia washed over me at the "Welcome to Blue Hills Farm" sign that still stood tall. The two-story white clapboard farmhouse rested on a high point overlooking the patchwork of barren winter fields. A long gravel driveway lined with mature pin oaks led up to the wraparound porch. I pictured Gramps sitting in his rocking chair there, waving as I arrived for the summer. Dragging my suitcases up the front steps, I got the jitters. What did I really know about tending a farm by myself? The enormity of the task hit all at once. Unlocking the etched glass door, I stepped into the foyer. A fine layer of dust that blurred the quaint floral wallpaper revealed no one had lived here for quite some time. The air smelled of worn leather and smoked cherry tobacco, the remnants of Gramps' presence. I strolled through the cozy living room and dining area, running my fingers over the antique furniture, frosted window panes, and ornate rugs that Gramps said were centuries old when he was a boy.
Oh, that's Vivian. What do you mean
In the
he has
kitchen,
nothing
faded
on?
yellow wallpaper peeled around an old cast iron stove
Buddy.
and floor-to-ceiling
Okay, then.
cabinets. The sink was dry and rusty. Making this place
Oh, you
livable
have a
again would
181
be a
also.
big job.
Well,
I sighed, moving on to explore the
wait a minute.
bedrooms and bath upstairs.
There we go.
The old iron bedsteads and vanities, more floral wallpaper, a bookshelf filled with well-worn Louis L'Amour paperbacks. This place was truly stuck in time. My only addition for now was setting up Gramps' mahogany roll-top desk in the corner bedroom I chose as my own, my work-from-home base while in Virginia. Through every warped window pane, I gazed out at the farm's endless hills and meadows. How I loved this place already. I pictured the orchards blossoming pink and white in spring, hills rolling with amber waves of grain in summer, the blazing technicolor canopy of hardwoods in fall. This is where I was meant to be. After the long drive, I was starving. Unpacking could wait until tomorrow. I headed out to the back porch to fire up the grill when I noticed the storm cellar doors. In an instant, Gramps' weathered voice flooded my mind with the stern warning he recited every summer of my childhood. Now don't you ever go messing around that old storm cellar, you hear? When I'd ask why, his eyes would darken and he'd grumble, "Just never you mind. There's things best left untouched." A chill ran down my spine, remembering the hardness in his voice. I stared at the rusty padlock and doors patched with creeping moss and wondered what secrets lay below. Shaking off a lurking unease, I fired up the grill and dug into my first Blue Hills Farm steak dinner. The future here suddenly seemed bright and full of promise. As the sun dipped below the silhouetted tree line, I felt at peace. I had made it. Gramps would be so proud. Tomorrow, a new chapter begins. It was my first night staying in Grandpa's old farmhouse after he passed away. I had always loved visiting here as a kid, but now, being here alone, it felt eerie. As I lay in bed missing Grandpa something awful, I was just drifting off around midnight when I woke with goosebumps. From somewhere outside, I could hear these strange, muffled cries, like somebody weeping. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then it came again. Desperate wailing cries that gave me the chills. I checked that all the doors were locked up tight before crawling back under the sheets. But I couldn't relax, listening close for the cries as my sleepy brain imagined all sorts of spooky stuff. Just as I finally calmed myself enough to doze off, the cries started up again, even louder than before. I fumbled for the flashlight Grandpa always kept in the bedside drawer. Gripping that heavy metal flashlight made me feel braver as I crept to peer out each window into the dark yard. Outside was pitch black and silent, with no sign of anything. I stepped out onto the creaky porch in my bare feet, sweeping the flashlight beam around the yard and surrounding fields. As I came around the back of the house, the cries started up again from somewhere nearby, louder than ever. My heart raced as I realized the sound was coming from Grandpa's old storm cellar. The wooden doors were rattling as another scream rose up from the blackness below. Part of me wanted to rush over, convinced something or someone was trapped down there and needed help. But in the flashlight's beam, I could see the cellar doors were chained and padlocked shut tight. Looking closer, I could just make out a sliver of inky blackness through the cracks between the old gray boards. But it was impossible to see inside, and the cries had stopped again, just as sudden as they started. I quickly checked the outside of the whole house, looking for any signs of intruders playing a mean prank on the new
I will
owner.
never hear the end of it.
But there was no movement,
Niceness
no
before
clues
nice,
left behind.
Liliana. Haven't I
Everything
always told
seemed
you?
normal on this still, dark night, except for
For
those
now.
desperate wailing cries echoing in my mind. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was trapped in that cellar, desperate for help. But why
How
had
have you been
Grandpa
feeling
kept it
since
locked
the
and
last?
forbidden me from going near
Good.
it?
Wonderful.
None of it made any
Valence
sense.
was something of a rebirth.
Exhausted but too
If you
spooked
hadn't
to
been
sleep,
with me at
I
Valence,
spent the next day
I would have
phoning my
killed
best friend
Mercury.
Alex,
I'd have
the
told you
closest
that I
thing
didn't
I
have
had
a
to
choice.
family these days.
But there is always
After
a
pouring my
choice.
heart out about missing Grandpa and
I
describing
am
the
more
weird
than this.
crying sounds, Alex
I am
gently
more than what
suggested it could be
Justinian
my
made me.
imagination or some animal noises that my grief-stricken mind had exaggerated. He kindly offered to drive out and stay with me until the funeral arrangements were finalized. Having
What
a
does
friend
this
there
mean for
would
my
mean so
Inquisition?
much,
Will you
No,
but
still
I
be my
didn't want
spy
to
master?
inconvenience Alex or
Of
come
course.
off as crazy.
I would not give up my
I
post.
insisted I was
Not
fine
after everything
alone,
we've
but
built.
made him promise to
I
come out
just know
soon
now
for a
that I
long
shouldn't
overdue
ignore
visit.
my heart. Mercy is not
I
always a
busied
weakness.
myself that day with going through Grandpa's things and making funeral plans, trying not to glance out at that cellar every few minutes. With the sunshine bathing the farmhouse, it was hard to believe those desperate cries even
Do you
happened.
resent Justinia for
Just
what
a
she
fox or stray
How
cat
can I when
trapped
there is
briefly
so
down
much
there,
between
I
us?
told myself.
When she gave her life
But
for
when night
peace?
fell, my
No,
fears
I
came
believe her
creeping back in.
intentions were pure.
I found myself
Most
jumping at
intentions
every
are.
little creak and pop of that old house settling. Determined not to be so spooked, I searched Grandpa's study to see if I could find any clues about that cellar. If it was just for
You've
storing
exceeded
vegetables
her.
or equipment,
She could
why
never
had he
have
been so
imagined the power
adamant
you
about
now
me never
hold.
going near it?
And now I will know how to
But
use
after
that
combing
power
through the
wisely.
clutter of books
I
and
have to
papers,
stay true
I
to
found
who I
nothing
really
about the
am,
history of the cellar
before
or
a spy
farm.
master, left hand or
Grandpa had
bard.
taken all those secrets to
Zelda,
the
quit
grave.
leaving.
I almost lost myself.
The only thing that gave me some comfort was making an entire pot of coffee that evening. I sat sipping the hot, bitter drink at the kitchen table as I watched the sunset through the window above the sink. The caffeine helped shake me from my drowsy fears as I resolved to stay awake all night listening for those cries again. I had to know if they were real or just my imagination so I could decide what to do next. Gripping my flashlight, I settled into the creaky wicker chair on the back porch to stand guard through the long night ahead. An owl hooted its lonely call in the distance as the last faint glow disappeared over the cornfields. It was just me and the coming darkness now. As the night wore on, I strained my ears, listening for any odd sounds from my perch on the back porch. I sipped cup after cup of bitter black coffee, fighting against my growing drowsiness. The empty, inky void of the cornfields and the lonely hoots of owls set my nerves on edge. I must have dozed off around 2 a.m. because I jerked awake and sloshed cold coffee over myself. Disoriented, it took me a moment to remember why I was outside in the wicker chair. Then I heard it. The faint but unmistakable cries drifting up from the storm cellar once again. Gripping my flashlight, I leaped up and stumbled through the overgrown grass around to the cellar doors. The cries were louder and more anguished than ever, interspersed with odd thumping sounds against the wooden doors. This was no animal. It sounded like a person down there.
And so polite.
Frantically, I searched for some way to open the doors, but they remained chained and padlocked.
Never mind.
I shouted down, "Hold on! I'm going to get you
We can
out!"
continue this conversation
But the
later.
cries only intensified until...
Now you're up. Do you need me to cook you some ham? Ham. You want it? Puppy, get up.
They dissolved into whimpers.
Get up.
Soon, an eerie
Get
silence returned, leaving me shaken.
Get
I swept
up.
the flashlight beam over
Jump.
every inch of the doors, even using a
Jump.
rake to prod into the weeds around the cellar entrance.
Jump.
But there was no secret latch or loose board. No
Jump.
way anything larger than a rat could have gotten
Jump.
in. Had I imagined it all? Exhausted and confused, I sat with my back against the cold cellar
Jump.
doors as the eastern
Come
sky
on.
lightened with dawn's approach.
Come on.
Either someone was trapped down there each night, or I was losing my mind.
Puppy,
I thought of Grandpa
jump.
refusing to speak of the cellar all these years. What
Hurry
secrets had he
up.
kept?
I'm
Then,
doing
for the
something.
third
Get
time
up
in a row,
here. I'm
I was
trying to
jolted
do
awake by the
something.
strange crying sounds coming from Grandpa's storm cellar again. Even with my bedroom window shut up tight and locked, the anguished
Stop
wail
it.
still drifted through the glass, barely muffled. I lay huddled beneath my old homemade quilt, trembling as each new sob arose from the darkness outside. The cries sounded like a woman, her voice raw from weeping, interspersed in soft whimpers that twisted my heart. What tormented soul was making these mournful cries outside each night? My increasing exhaustion left me feeling totally disoriented and filled with dread as I strained to listen. I couldn't make out any clear words, only pained moans that seemed to increase in intensity as the hours dragged on. I glanced at the bedside clock,
That's all you're getting.
3:17 a.m. The red numbers glowed ominously in the dark room. I considered trying to drown out the noise with my headphones, but knew sleep would be impossible. The anguished cries seeped into my brain, conjuring vivid images to accompany each wail. I pictured a skeletal woman in a tattered white gown, her face obscured by long dark hair, clawing desperately at the storm cellar doors with bloody fingernails. Shuddering, I pulled the covers over my head, but it did little to blunt the sounds.
Wow,
Only the approach of dawn finally brought some relief around 5:30 a.m. as the cries faded back into silence. Exhausted, I knew I couldn't endure another night like this. If I had to face another onslaught of those wrenching sobs, I felt certain it would drive me over the edge of sanity. When the first dim rays of sunlight crept into my bedroom at dawn, I knew I had to get to the bottom of this today, no matter what it took. The lack of sleep was already making me feel like a jittery mess, unable to concentrate or function properly. I needed answers before I unraveled completely. I got dressed sluggishly, my limbs heavy and my head throbbing. Despite my fatigue, determination propelled me forward.
Oh my gosh, my sound
Gripping a
just
steaming
died.
cup of black coffee, I headed out into the chilly morning air towards the storm cellar as the sun peaked above the horizon. The grass was soaked with dew, dampening the hems of my jeans as I made my way across the lawn. Approaching the wooden doors now bathed in...
Can't get my sound come back on unless I close the game. Just shut down 15 minutes ago and now it has no sound. Oh, it came back on, I think. Well, it keeps popping. Great, my speakers are messed up. The sound on my PlayStation, but not on the game.